Hello, Trinity Tigers. Welcome to the Learning Together live webinar series as part of the Lifelong Learning Initiative presented by Trinity University's Office of Alumni Relations. I'm Nathan Cohn, class of 1995, and I'm also the Vice President of Cultural and Community Engagement at Texas Public Radio, where I've worked since graduation. If you're already familiar with Texas Public Radio, perhaps you know me from hosting music on our classical music station, KPAC, or as the host of Cinema Tuesdays, our summertime film series. Well, tonight I'm here because Trinity's Office of Alumni Relations has invited me to moderate tonight's webinar discussion on a film. January is National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month, and tonight's webinar conversation on the film Wake Up is intended to help increase awareness. Sex trafficking isn't a problem that other folks have to deal with. It lives in suburban America, and the filmmaker tonight, our own alumna, Janet Craig, class of 85, weaves a shocking tale of foster youth caught up in a trap of sexual abuse and coercion in this feature film. I'm happy that Janet Craig and her husband and producer of the film, Doug Grossman, Trinity class of 84, have made time to participate in the discussion. Janet Craig, 85, is a writer, director, and producer of the film Wake Up. Veteran actress Craig is a first-time feature film director, having cut her teeth directing theater and numerous short films. Her acting credits consist of a wide variety of roles, including appearances on network television, film, and in theater. Doug Grossman, class of 1984, is the producer of the film Wake Up. He has a studio business background, having worked over 2 decades at Disney and 20th Century Fox, where he was the Senior Vice President of Operations and Supply Chain at 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment. Thanks so much for being a part of this evening, and let's all watch Wake Up together.
Maybe why don't you and Janet start talking about the film that might be of some interest?
Yeah, for sure. So really, it's Janet. Janet's the one who wrote the movie, and she was inspired to write the movie, and so she wrote it, she directed it, and if you saw it in the midst of the choppiness there, you could actually see that she was acting in the movie. And she just finished a multi-city tour with the movie. I know at least there are a handful of alums that were able to see the movie when it screened in Dallas just a week or so ago.
Atlanta, also.
Dallas, Atlanta. Anyway, Janet, what was your inspiration for the movie?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm really sorry that you can't see it tonight. I was excited to share it, and we've had a really wonderful time taking it to cities around the country because it is National Trafficking Awareness Month, and what we wanted to do is take the movie to show audiences and then have a panel discussion with those people on the front lines in each community about when our oldest daughter was 16. She took us to a fundraiser for an organization called Forever Found, and it was the first time I'd ever heard a beautiful, articulate young woman tell the story of being trafficked. And at that moment, I wanted to take the entire world and bring them into that room because I knew that if they all heard her story, they'd feel like I did, that we had to do something. And so Doug and I started this project to bring awareness. We're also foster parents, and our producing partners are foster parents. They've fostered over 100 kids. And so the Wises and the Grossmans have kind of put this together as an opportunity to share and to bring awareness. And also, we didn't want it to just be a documentary, so we made it a thriller, which you weren't able to see tonight, but I hope when it is in your theaters near you, you'll come see it. We're sold out in Thousand Oaks and Simi Valley this coming weekend, and we had a sold out theater in Redlands, and it's been fun to have the audiences together and to see it in a theater, so I hope you guys will watch for it. And our website has a lot of the information on there, so if you go to the website, you'll see some of the news and some of the inspiration behind this. And on the website, there's a link if you want to be on our mailing list or you want us to connect with you directly. If you go to the website and put in your email address, then we can come get a hold of you guys. So yeah, our website has all our social media links. It also has some great information. Rachel C. Thomas, who's on the National Trafficking Advisory Board, has joined us in this film. And she actually helped with some of the dialogue for those girls that have been trafficked, because she's a survivor, advocate, educator. and she has her links to educational resources. We also are supporting 3 nonprofits. One is called Raising Hope, and 2 anti-trafficking, that's a foster organization, and 2 anti-trafficking organizations, Forever Found and Zoe International. And those organizations are also on the website with information about each of them and ways to connect. One of the hopes that we have is that everybody will feel the need to get involved and do something. So we're hoping you will. Can you talk about some of your experience fostering or helping girls in crisis? Sure. So we've been foster parents for about 13 years now. And a lot of these stories that are in the movie were inspired by our producing partners and by our experience with the foster care system. We actually adopted through foster care. And it's an interesting thing what we've learned from the kids that we've been involved with and the families. And one of the things that I've learned is that society wants to really focus on just the child, but we need to also focus on the biological family, supporting them and helping them, and the foster families, supporting and helping them. And we just have really seen that when we just isolate and just focus on the kid, and we're not taking care of the parents that have been traumatized and also traumatized their child, there's a gap there. So a lot of the work we're trying to do is to help come alongside birth families who've lost their children because of substance abuse, have lost their children because of maybe they were raised by people that didn't know how to nurture them. And so coming alongside them, and also foster families a lot of times don't have the support. So we'd like to open the eyes of those people to just how you can jump in and help. And in trafficking, it's the statistics are that over 65% of kids that are trafficked have gone through the foster care system. And so it's a very vulnerable population. And so one of the things that we're doing with this film is just opening up the eyes to people. Our film is not a good versus evil. It's a film about people capable of both. So it's how lives impact and intersect. And we show a lot of different things that are going on in the world around us. And we call it Wake Up, because we're just hoping that each person will find themselves in this film and in a way to just join the championing foster kids. Do you want to say anything about foster kids?
No, I think hopefully that helped. I know there was another question here from an anonymous attendee who was asking about how large the problem is. And really if you're familiar with an organization called Fight the New Drug, they say that pornography is the marketing department of the sex trafficking industry. So the magnitude of the problem spans beyond trafficking itself, and it moves into the world of pornography. I think there's we want to be really careful with statistics, because we don't want to be careless with throwing numbers out, but the magnitude of the problem it starts with pornography. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all. I know Rachel talks about that in the movie, or she doesn't talk statistics in the movie, but just the connection between pornography, the vast majority of people who are in that content are not there on their own volition. So it ties into pornography, ties into sex trafficking very closely. So they're very interconnected.
Well, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, trafficking, and it is happening in every community all around the world. And so what we found is that people, if someone is watching underage pornography, it's 100% trafficking. And the statistics that Rachel said is over 70% of porn is being created by trafficked victims. And so that's really staggering to think that there are people who make adult content, but if you're watching adult content, the chances of watching someone being trafficked and providing the vehicle to have those people trafficked by purchasing and watching, that's actually increasing the problem. And it's also, it's just been a massive, people have been seeing things like the Epstein things going on, and we want to point a finger and say, oh, it's that person or this person. But the statistics that I know that I've heard is it's over 85% of the adult population is watching pornography. And now kids are getting devices in their hands as young as 7 years old and stumbling onto it. So, and the average age of a kid being trafficked is between 12 to 14 years old, and it's boys and girls. So there's just a staggering problem that we have in our world.
Any other question? Talk about our experience fostering, magnitude of the problem.
I did get involved with Forever Found in the and Zoe International. There's a lot of
Which
great
are
books,
local. They're local.
organizations.
We're in Southern California, so local for us is Southern California.
But they also have international arms. So Zoe's also in Thailand, and Forever Found's also in India, and they're expanding. And one of the things is getting educated to be a mentor. And that's been a really amazing opportunity to learn from those on the front lines that are survivors and those that are advocates. We met so many amazing people around the country that are doing great work. And one of the benefits of going on the road was this, is we were able to meet people that are on the front lines in each community. So we met judges that are working and anti-trafficking organizations, foster organizations all around the country. So we really have a lot of resources now for other people. So if you're in a particular place and you want to know resources in your area, feel free to email us that as well, and we'll try to send out the best resources we have for you in your particular area.
What are some ways that victims of trafficking can get out of it?
Yeah.
Well,
that's a question from Nicole.
Yeah, one of the founder of Raising Hope, her name's Tammy Barnett, and it's a foster organization, but as you know, many are trafficked. And she said it takes one caring, compassionate adult to change the course of somebody's life. And I think that to be aware that there are opportunities to get out. If you see trafficking, call 911. If you're being trafficked, to call 911. And a lot of trafficked kids are actually in schools, and it's to be open and honest with the people they can trust. And if they don't have someone they can trust, that's sort of the problem. So getting out of trafficking, it takes time. Rachel Thomas said it took one compassionate police officer and a host of nonprofits that worked with her to really help her. There are organizations that are working with those that have been trafficked to help them not go back into the life.
Why don't you talk a little bit about, because not all trafficking are like, if any of you have seen the movie Taken, you know, where the girls are actually kidnapped and taken away. And in our movie, there is some of that element where people are actually.
Oh, we're keeping it a surprise because we want you to watch it.
Yeah, but not all trafficking looks the same, I guess is what I'm getting at, right? So not all trafficking victims are whisked away to some location elsewhere. Some are. That is the profile of some trafficking victims, but some of them might be, a kid in high school who's part of the foster system, and they're being trafficked. They might be still living at home with their parents, and they're being trafficked because they're under the influence of the trafficker, and they're being used for, they're being exploited sexually in that kind of context. So it's not all trafficking is, fully physically, whisked away and trapped. So there are a lot of different ways that it can look. And that's why some of them can take a while to get out, because you might be a junior in high school at a local high school who's stuck in it because somebody's, figured a way to keep you entrapped in the cycle. So.
And I think one of the ways that people get out of trafficking is those compassionate adults, and also our police, law enforcement. One of the things is a lot of these kids got arrested, and then that was the way that they were rescued, because they were found to have been being trafficked by virtue of police coming in and getting these kids out. Sometimes it's a teacher seeing what's going on, watching for signs. And then one of the reasons we made the movie also is just to show all the different, many of the ways. You can't show all the ways in one movie, but we showed many of the ways that people are being tricked or manipulated, and showed ways that people could make different choices that would help them along the way. So that's probably the best answer for right now is just being aware as adults to try and help those kids that are vulnerable that we see. And if someone is actually being trafficked, finding somebody to walk alongside that you can be honest and trust. We keep the dialogue going with parents. If kids are being trafficked, if their parents are able to keep dialogue with them and not be condemning, but meet them right where they're at, open discussion and not afraid to talk about stuff. Rachel had a really hard time telling her parents that she had been trafficked. And that was one way that the trafficker kept her, because she was lying to her parents and pretended she was still in school. And had she told her parents earlier, she might have been able to get out, but she was afraid for their lives because the trafficker was threatening them and all that kind of stuff.
So she had a sexual experience with somebody might be one example, and then they feel shamed about it, so they want to tell their parents about it, and so the person can then hold that against them and say, "I want to tell your parents you've been acting out sexually," and so so there's that is one way that they would keep them entrapped.
And there's a question: are most trafficked kids in foster care? The highest percentage of trafficked kids are in foster care, but there are kids come from foster care. But there are kids that are trafficked in every socioeconomic, they're all over the world in all different ways. People are being trafficked. So it's in our neighborhoods. It's sometimes it's parents trafficking their kids. Sometimes it's a boyfriend or another girl that's been trafficking her friends. It gets a little bit messy because some girls don't know they're being trafficked because they think it's their boyfriend. Or some boys don't know they're being trafficked. They think, it's boys, girls, men and women being trafficked, and it's different for everyone. Right now, someone asked if they could watch the movie on a streaming site. Right now, you can't, but our plans are to have it available in 2022, and we're in negotiations now. So hopefully it will be out soon. We want to do a theatrical release first. We'd love to get it in theaters and have people have that opportunity to come together and see it, and then have the streaming.
How long did it take to film the movie?
It's been 7 years.
No, but actual filming.
16 days. We filmed during COVID. It was amazing. It was a literal miracle. We were able to film the movie during COVID.
Shut down once during COVID because of COVID?
Shut down twice. We were shut down for a day, the first time for a false positive on our set. And then we were shut down for 3 weeks in the middle of filming. So we shot 4 days and then we shot the rest, the 12 days after that. I'm encouraged that people care about this and that they're interested in helping fight and learning about it and all that. So hopefully we can bring it back. What are some of the signs to look for that someone might be a victim of trafficking?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Very good question. One of the things traffickers will do is they will go to a mall, for instance, and say hello to kids. And the ones that look them in the eyes and say hello back, they stay away from them. And the ones that look down and don't have confidence, that's their target. If a child is withdrawn or is isolating, doesn't seem to have any connections or friends outside of one or two people, or being not speaking for themselves. So if you are out in public and you see that there's someone talking for someone else all the time, one of the things I saw most recently in where we live in Thousand Oaks, I saw trafficking happening right before I went on tour in a really nice neighborhood. But I saw a man get out of a car that was probably in his 40s, and then a young girl got out of the back seat on the other side of the car and came over. She was wearing a large man's dress shirt, and that's all she was wearing. And she came up to him. She probably was 12. She might have been 14. And she came up to him and stood looking up at him. And he stroked her hair and treated her not as a child, but as a girlfriend. And then they walked over to get ice cream at this place, and he left her on the sidewalk and walked away from her. I called 911 and then watched as the police came and interrogated. And as the police arrived, I watched the young girl, and she had already been coached on how to deal with her trafficker and deal with the police. And they make the kids afraid of police officers and afraid of law enforcement. So the girl was under his thumb already. So it's the difference in age, the way that someone's behaving.
Something that just doesn't look right, right? Just use your instinct, your gut, right? If something just doesn't look right, a 12-year-old being petted by a 40-year-old like that, treated like a girlfriend, that's just not right, right? That just is a red flag.
And it was easier for me to spot it because they were different. They didn't look anything alike. The little girl was Asian and the man was African-American, but it can be, there are boys being trafficked. One way they're grooming boys right now is through games. So little tiny boys are playing these games and they don't know who they're playing against. And traffickers are using games to groom these little boys. And so what'll happen is they'll say, oh, show me your muscles and all that kind of stuff. And they'll be in relationship in this game and they're creating these. It seems like they're close, and the traffickers can get information from these kids about where they are and what they do. And the little boy, might not know. So that's how boys are being groomed mostly. And then, well, there's all different ways, but that's one way. And then also young girls putting themselves out on social media, a little 12, 13, and 14-year-olds.
So does that mean that if I have a 12, 13, 8, 9, 10-year-old child, I should never let them play video games or never let them go to the mall or things like that?
It's just keeping an eye on it. So if you have a child on video games, always having access to their video games.
Their profiles.
Yeah, and I would also make sure that you have access to the phones of all your kids and that you can find your children by Find My Friends on your kids' apps so that you can find them if they get in with the wrong people, and just transparency and sharing with kids. That's why we made it sort of a PG-13-ish movie so that kids can see how they might be vulnerable. Rachel said at one of the screenings, Rachel Thomas said, had I seen this movie, I don't think I would have been trafficked. And she was trafficked as a college kid. And she's beautiful. And someone approached her to ask her if she would be a model. She did one gig with the guy, and it turned out to be a real modeling gig in her eyes. And then for the second gig, he asked her to fill out a W-4, and she did, or an I-9 or whatever she filled out. And that's all he needed to manipulate her, because then her parents were at risk because he had their address. And so he used that to threaten her, and she was caught up in trafficking.
Yeah.
Miranda, I hope that general conversation helped answer your question of risk factors of being trafficked. If you want to just let us know if we need to clarify any further on that.
I think one reason that foster kids are more vulnerable maybe than other kids is because they don't have that support system at home. So really making sure that we're taking care of the kids around us, even if, just keeping our eyes and ears open and being those adults that will care, that will step in, that will create relationships that are real and let kids be vulnerable and honest.
Be that annoying, nosy parent, but also be that parent that recognizes that kids, probably like most of us, are going to make some really bad mistakes, and just to be there with them through those things, rather than making the kid feel like they have to hide when something bad happens to them, so that the kid can feel open to be able to discuss with you if something's going on that's unusual in their life, not something that they have to hide from you. Because those are the kinds of things that the traffickers will prey upon if they see a kid who's afraid to talk to their parents, or afraid to share that they did anything wrong with their parents, because they're going to get in big trouble. If they can get that kid to do one little thing wrong, they can use that as a lever to keep the kid from, going to their parents. I know that's easier said than done. We have 4 kids ourselves. 3 of them are in their 20s, and so we get it. It's not that it's not just it's more easily said than done. But as parents, that's what we need to strive for, is that openness with our kids. And
I think the shame that traps people in all different things. I think if we could come alongside each other, I think if someone's struggling with sex addiction or pornography, instead of pointing a finger, coming alongside, that might help get one less client, one less person who's buying kids, one less person that's struggling. If we can come alongside someone who's struggling with addiction. Another thing is to just come alongside our kids or anybody who's really made some crazy mistakes, because we all have, and just really allowing people to be honest and transparent will help us to stop this, because the shame traps them.
Janet, did your everything's covered the last question coming?
I hope we did with Miranda. I don't know. Are there any risk factors of being trafficked?
No, the last one that came in, that for those who work with children and
oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't see those couple extras. Okay. Age, attribute, disability that makes someone more vulnerable. Miranda, hopefully we answered those two questions for you just by the general discussion. It's anonymous. Children and young adults, how can we help them be less vulnerable to trafficking?
Yeah.
I think that one of the reasons I made the movie is I wanted people to be less vulnerable, because they see and understand what can really happen. I think having an honest discussion with kids, letting them know there's nothing they can do that will separate them from you, that there's nothing that you need to know if there's anything, and that we're all going to blow it, and keeping open conversations
between parents and kids,
and
guardians and kids. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, if you're working with children, look for signs also if a child is starting to withdraw, or a child is acting all of a sudden differently than they were before. If you see marks on a child, tattoos on a child, a lot of traffickers tattoo their stable is what they call them, but tattoo the girls, the boys, to show ownership. And so that's something to look for also. And maybe if a child's not starting to do well, all of a sudden they're not doing well and they were doing well before, or they seem unengaged, or they're depressed. All those kinds of things can mean something happen.
Sudden significant behavior changes in the kids.
And to help them be less vulnerable, educate them on devices, on how to be safe on their technology. And I would definitely ask them to have accountability with you on their devices. It just protects them from.
So you can see all their social media, all their texting, all that kind of stuff. We're big advocates of
Covenant Eyes.
Having all devices protected with something like a Covenant Eyes. If you're not familiar with that particular, we don't own it. We have no personal interest in Covenant Eyes, but it's a filtering software, reporting software. So it sends reports to parents or whoever, so you can see if the person has been getting into trouble on the internet, going to websites, pornographic, that kind of thing. It just helps. Just kind of put some very important guardrails up. I have it on all my devices, every single one of them, and I'm 59 years old. So there's, nobody's immune to, nobody should not have guardrails. Everybody should have guardrails up. So we're big advocates of that.
That's a very good one.
What are some ways to talk to younger children about the dangers of social media and gaming that can understand on their terms? Go outside and play baseball.
Yeah.
I think
easier said than done, right?
I think depending on the age, every child's different and every relationship is different. So a 5-year-old, I don't really think should be on gaming devices or social media at this point. Being careful about when you allow a child to be on social media and to be on these devices. If they're not old enough to understand dangers, maybe they're not old enough to be on them without complete supervision, is what I would say. I would not allow a child that's unable to be talked to about the dangers of social media be on social media. So when they're old enough to understand that there can be predators and that people might not be who they say they are on the other end of the device, or even if they are who they say they are. A lot of traffickers are young, and they've cute 16-year-old boy who gives attention to a 12-year-old girl and maybe even meets the family and there's 6 or 7 months of relationship and everybody thinks he's great. That's how it works. I mean, they are masters of creating relationship with the child that makes that child or that person that's being trafficked feel like that person's their person. And so just really being, keeping the conversations open and being careful about who's with your kid alone and all of that. Is my understanding.
It's my understanding that social media and texting leads to trafficking. However, I believe that email could lead to trafficking. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Miranda, I think anything can lead to trafficking if the trafficker is the person you're in contact with. There's so many grooming. These people are brilliant. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's a lot of money in it, and there's a lot of these traffickers. They spend a lot of time figuring out how the best ways to get these kids, which are commodities, and the younger the children are, the more money they bring. So that's pretty sad also. But yes, email can be a way. I would say anytime somebody's relating to somebody that they don't know, I mean, precautions, and then even people that they do know, make sure you have protection. And sometimes you're not going to have protection. So it's knowing what to say when you run into a situation, how to behave when somebody's doing something that they shouldn't be. What are signs through email and text should I watch out for? Inappropriate comments. There are a lot of different codes now, ways that people relate to each other. There's a whole list of things that can be texted to make it so parents don't know what's being sent. And those you can Google and find out
code words, like texting code words, yeah.
For how to keep your parents to not know. And I think you're also just ask your child if it's you making the emails and texts, it's different. But if it's somebody else that you're responsible for, I would say ask them about the people they're involved with and what that means, and just keep the dialogue open.
Does that help, Miranda? You're asking a lot of really good questions here.
I think a lot of times kids are going to exploit themselves. Young children are sending images of themselves to people they know and people they don't know. So if someone sends an image of themselves to someone, maybe they're in a relationship and then they break up with that person, and those images can go viral. They can get in the wrong hands. So again, being there for them when they've made a mistake and letting them know that no matter what, you're there for them, I think is the biggest key.
Doug, if we open the chat function, would you be able to share the app that you said that, hey, I have it also on my, as a guardrail? That might be helpful. We just opened the chat function also, because there are a lot of good questions and they're eagerness there to learn more.
Happy to. You want to do it in the chat, so we'll move over to chat.
Yeah, just for those, because they will see it. Pat, is it open? Is the yeah. Okay, good.
And look, there are other, there are other good quality filter out there. So and then I'm also putting the movie's website. So if you guys go over to, instead of the Q&A button, if you click on the chat button, which is also down at the bottom, there are 2 links. One of them is Covenant Eyes, which is the filtering and accountability reporting software, and then the one right below it is for the movie.
And Miranda, Rachel Thomas on our website has links to her trainings, and she has trainings for different ages, and she has trainings for teens and trainings for kids and parents. And so those are really great. If you go on the website, you'll be able to click on her and be able to follow her and get some of her free training and some that are classes that she gets paid to do. And so that's great. Yeah, I think
Excellent.
it's enjoying, right?
Yes. Anonymous
That's-
attendee said, do you think it's important that communities begin to recognize that this problem is simply not a quote parent, guardian, child issue, but a community issue that we all need to be aware of? Yes.
Absolutely. And that was the bummer for me that we didn't get to show the movie, because we really do show all different parts of community coming
Yeah.
together. And there's people from all different walks of life that are affected by this, and in every aspect. So you've got the person, when I made the movie, my big question was, why do we have a multi-billion-dollar industry? Who's buying? And I wanted to answer that with the movie and show it. And I also wanted to show the vulnerability and all of those kinds of things. But yes, for sure, it's a community issue. I hope everybody will take it seriously and be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Lisa's asking over here, is there a certain age that a child ages out of being a victim and becomes a trafficker? So
There's no real age of when they become a trafficker. Some traffickers are really young. I don't think there's traffickers under the age of 5 probably, but there's traffickers. What happens a lot of times is that kids are trafficked and then they have a choice. You either, one pimp wrote, this is a quote, "You're either a pimp or a hoe in this world. So who are you going to be, a pimp or a hoe?" And traffickers oftentimes are kids who've been trafficked. So what will happen is that in order to not be trafficked anymore, they'll work for the trafficker and bring in other kids. And so I think I think even traffickers can be victims.
you depict one element of that former victim becoming a trafficker in the movie, right?
Yeah.
But the movie, the magnitude of the issue is huge. I'm putting my hands really far apart, and Janet can, the movie can only depict a certain portion of it, obviously. So, but yeah, good question, Lisa. Somebody just sent me offline. They have my cell phone number, saying, I know you'd mentioned Find My Friends, as a way to keep an eye on our children. Our go-to is something called Life 360 as a way to track each other. I'm not familiar with Life 360, but if people are familiar with that, just sharing that somebody texted me on my cell phone. Life 360 is a way to track one another, which sounds like, oh, it's an invasion of privacy or whatever. But you know what? You're our kid, you're getting tracked. And guess what? Janet tracks me and I track her. We all keep an eye on each other.
Thanks, Mark, for your participation. Really
Thanks, Mark.
appreciate it.
Doug, looks like we are kind of closer to the end, and
Yeah.
this conversation, I can tell, that continue, and glad that we opened the chat box and people have shared some good questions, and you shared some of the sites, and these are all beneficial. And we will certainly look for ways to reschedule this. And if you could take a look at your calendar, you and I can talk differently and separately, and then
Yes.
We might be able to reschedule it when we are certain that there will not be any technical issues with that.
I know,
for sure.
I know.
Yeah.
And somebody had asked earlier, and I'm not sure if I just did a real quick search. Hopefully I'm not wrong with this. This looks like the Life 360 link that somebody was just texting me separately about. So hopefully that's helpful to people if they want to.
Yeah.
Somebody had texted or sent a message earlier saying, would you come post COVID? Would you come on campus? Yeah, we'd love to.
Fantastic. That's good to know. Yeah.
It's always better live. We'd love to show it in a theater.
The best way to see it is
in
in a theater. But,
Exactly.
Yeah. And it always gives us an excuse to come back to
Absolutely.
Yes,
Thanks, Lisa. Good to
Yes.
see you via text or chat.
Sounds like we're getting ready to sign out, everyone. Janet and I are happy to stick around, but it looks like people are wrapping unless there are any more last questions.
Yeah.